everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome back to part 3 of our 4-part Yellow Turban character guide series. In this guide, we'll be covering the Healer class, so let's get started. As we discussed in part 1, the Healer class has 5 distinct backgrounds as shown here in the Visor, Fortune Teller, Musician, Physician, and Singer. Today we'll dive deeper into each of these backgrounds by looking at their skill trees. So to begin, we will look at all the healer skills that are shared by all 5 of these backgrounds. Starting from the left here, we have Charisma, which provides 2 public order to local commanderies, as well as 10 points to morale to own retinue. Both of these bonuses are pretty average, as we have discussed before that Yellow Turban has some of the best buildings in the game to deal with public order issues, and while morale is an important stat, a simple own retinue buff is not exactly game changing. Next, we have Defiance, which provides 10% armor to own retinue and plus 5 military supplies in enemy territory. Similar to Charisma, both of these bonuses are just so-so, as the armor bonus is nice but not game-changing, and the military supply bonus is highly situational. Then we come to Effortless Flow, which grants own army 10% additional campaign movement range and 10% movement speed to own retinue. Now this is a great skill to pick up on for all your healer generals, as the campaign movement boost is not only a quality of life improvement, but also can be game changing as you can stack these to create some highly mobile army groups that can help you defend more territories or catch enemies off guard on offense. Lastly, we have Tranquility, which unlocks the recovery buff for characters and adds 3% income from peasantry faction-wide. Recovery is a really nice buff, and faction-wide peasantry income is always welcome, so this makes Tranquility quite a nice skill. So now that we have discussed all 4 of these passive skills, I just want to make a simple observation here. In our last guide, all 4 of the Scholar skills we covered provided a clear identity for the Scholar class as an excellent court character class, since they provide nice passive faction-wide bonuses to research rate and commerce. The healer skill bonuses here are clearly more battlefield oriented, but not in the sense that they're damage boosting. Instead, they can be more generalized bonuses that can be beneficial to both ranged and melee compositions, as you're boosting morale, armor, and speed, which are all generic stats shared by all units. So for us to find the best specialized builds here, we really need to focus in on the non-healer skills on the healer skill trees. Okay. Now that we covered these passive skills, let's also take a quick look again at the 3 active skills in the knowledge of the body, the mind, and the spirit. All healers will start with knowledge of the mind, which I believe is the strongest active skill for all Yellow Turban characters, as it not only has the 3.8k splash damage, it also lowers the enemy morale by 50 points. Because this is so strong, it does have a huge cooldown of 300 seconds or 5 minutes. The other 2 skills here are Knowledge of the Mind, which provides a huge heal over 20 seconds to any general, which can only be used 3 times in any given battle with the same 300-second cooldown. And finally, we have Knowledge of the Spirit, which is a morale passive buff. That's basically a stronger version of the Encourage skill. As you will notice in many of the builds that I will be recommending later in the guide, I tend to avoid picking up these 2 active skills in Knowledge of the Body and the Spirit, as the Knowledge of the Mind is the best skill, and the massive heal is less relevant when we are trying to field generals that all have recovery skill, and the morale boost is more of a glorified upgraded version of Encourage, so I don't really place a lot of value on it, especially since many of our fighting armies will feature higher tier troops with either high morale or unbreakable. Okay, now that we have revealed all the skills that are shared by all 5 healer backgrounds, let's actually look at the skill tree to see what makes each of them so unique. Starting out with the Visor, we can see that this background adds 5 points to expertise, cunning, and authority. The leadership bonus is where a Visor shines, as it provides minus 10% to corruption. In part 1 of our guide series, I explained how corruption reduction is in high demand within the Yellow Turban faction. So this bonus alone is a good enough reason to consider the Visor background as a potential leader. Aside from this, all Visor starts out with a Charisma skill, unlocked, which gives the character a small boost to public order in local commanderies, and plus 10 points of morale for own retinue like we discussed before. Before we go on with the recommended build for this background, we must also mention the Singer background, which shares an identical skill tree with the Visor shown here. Now, Singer backgrounds boost expertise, resolve, and instinct by 5 points each, and has a leadership bonus of +6 satisfaction faction-wide. This is not a great bonus, as it's basically just as good as one in building, so I don't recommend making Singers into leaders. So as I mentioned before, since the shared healer skills are all pretty lackluster and doesn't have a clear identity, what's going to determine our ideal build here are the 8 non-healer skills on the skill tree, and they are Inspiration and Integrity from the Scholar class, Focus and Subtlety from the Veteran class, and Consideration, Abundance, Fury, and Clarity from the base game. Now, sadly, after much analysis, I concluded that the Visors and Singers are terrible healer backgrounds who are bad at everything in the game. Their skills have low synergies and no strong emphasis on any role, so if you get these characters, just stash them as idle court characters, as they at least do possess the passive faction-wide bonuses for all 3 income sources as shown here. While these 2 backgrounds are disappointing, our next background of Fortune Teller is the shining star of the healer class. We can see here that Fortune Tellers boost Instinct by 5 points and Authority by 10 points. Its leadership bonus is a nice 10% boost to Commerce income. And its level 1 healer skill is Defiance, which adds 10% armor to own retinue and grants own armies 5 additional military supplies per turn while in enemy territory. The 8 non-healer skill for the Fortune Tellers are Inspiration and Insight from the Scholar class, Focus and Opportunism from the Veteran class, and Flexibility, Endurance, Reach, and Meditation from the base game. Now, just glancing at all these skills here, you can quickly tell this is going to be a great character for your faction. So the first build I'm going to recommend is the Commanding General build, featuring the Bringers of Righteousness unit right here. This is the Yellow Turban version of the Zor Dragon unit, as it is a dual-wielding glaive and bow unit that is good at everything except against range units, since it has low armor and non-existent range block chance, but it has good range damage and can trade damage with those said range units. And it also doubles its function as an anti-cavalry flank unit that can also dish out range damage as the enemy cavalry charges towards you, because you have one formation that splits your troops in half, with half of them holding a spear wall while the other half still can shoot arrows at incoming cavalry. Now, this build is called the Commanding General build because all 4 base game skills on the Fortune Teller skill tree provide some sort of bonus when the Fortune Teller is your Commanding General. As you can see here, we have plus 25% campaign movement range, plus 5% replenishment, minus 50% attrition, and plus 10 points of morale on defense, all from these 4 base game skills on the Fortune Teller skill tree. Additionally, your units will have fatigue resistance, your general will have the unbeatable combination of unbreakable and recovery, while your Bringers of Righteousness retinues can enjoy a 10% boost to range damage, 15% boost to range armor piercing damage, as well as the ability to use Fire Arrow. On top of all this, your army will also receive 50% more post-battle loot. In the early game, you can also choose to run this build for the Fortune Teller with a full retinue of Yellow Turban archers or peasant archers, as you do get the nice range damage boost with Fire Arrow. In the late game, however, the best range unit that healers can have are Yellow Turban archers, which are shown here. And if you compare this option with the Bringers of Righteousness, other than the fact that they have a little bit extra ammo, the Bringers of Righteousness is going to outperform your archers in every aspect. So if money isn't a big issue, then definitely transition your healers to Bringer of Righteous build for the late game. Now, not only are Fortune Tellers great commanding generals, they also make great leaders and great idle court characters. As a leader, you will receive the 10% to commerce income from the background bonus, as well as minus 25% redeployment cost discount from flexibility and plus 1 army count from reach. And if the traits for your fortune teller happen to be bad and not suited to become a general or leader, they are the best idle court characters for the healer class, as they not only have all 3 income boosts just like the Visor and Singer, they also get the 10% boost to research rate. So hands down, the fortune teller background is best at everything for the healer class. So pay close attention on the traits on your fortune tellers and put them to good use in your armies, in the court leadership roles, or level them up as idle court characters if the traits are poor. Next up, we have musician, which boosts expertise by 5 points and instinct by 10 points. The leadership bonus here is plus 6 morale, which is decent. The level 1 healer skill for the musician will be effortless flow, which increases your army campaign movement range by 10% and own retinue running speed by 10% as well. The 8 non-healer skills on the musician are resolution and integrity from the scholar class, fanaticism and subtlety from the veteran class, and judgment, flexibility, vengeance, and mobility from the base game. With these skills, the musician can also be a great general fielding an army of bringers of righteousness again. This is because if we use the build shown here, we now have fanaticism, which boosts melee damage, and judgment, which boosts range damage. When combined, the perfect unit to take advantage of all of this diverse bonus is the dual-wielding bringers of righteousness. When compared to the fortune teller build that we just showcased, this will be slightly worse, as your general no longer has the unbreakable plus recovery combination, and you lose out on having reach, which adds so much mobility to your armies. Finally, we end with the physician background, which boosts expertise, resolve, and authority by 5 points each, and has a leadership bonus of adding 3% to replenishment rate faction-wide. This sounds okay, but if you think about it, you don't have access to leadership roles until your late game, when your population, reform, and buildings would have already been all set up to have a very high replenishment rate that's possibly even greater than the maximum amount of 50%. So I wouldn't put physician as your ideal leadership position. Their level 1 skill is Tranquility, which grants recovery and the 3% bonus faction-wide to peasantry income. And since this is their free level 1 skill, I always welcome as many physicians as I want in our faction, as the 3% peasantry income will stack up. And their 8 non-healer skills are Insight and Resolution from Scholar class, Opportunism and Fanaticism from the Veteran class, and Wisdom, Consideration, Intensity, and Stability from the base game. And the best build for Physician is to make them into generals, with retinues of melee units. Now, when I say melee units, I mean any of these 3 units. They can be the White Wave Horsemen, which is the only shot cavalry unit for the Yellow Turbans. It's comparable actually to a Tiger and Leopard cavalry of Cao Cao in the base game. Or you can field an army full of Youxia, which are heavy sword infantry with high evasion, high armor, and good range block chance. It's also unbreakable, but it is prone to cavalry charges. Lastly, you can consider running an army of Armed of the Supreme Peace. These are super high damage melee assault units holding giant maces that can create splash damage attacks with every single swing of their mace. It has decent melee defense, but would be easily destroyed by either a cavalry charge or arrows from range units. All 3 of these units here are a bit situational and can't be an all-rounder, with the exception of Youxia, who could potentially be the unit you can field 6 of and feel good in all situations. So it's best you create your own mix of army composition between the 3, depending on the situation. For example, if you do go like say 2 of each, you can be flexible in most situations, since White Wave Horsemen will counter non-spear infantry and range units, but get easily countered by a simple unit like the Ji Militia, who will be completely wrecked by your Arms of the Supreme Peace, which counters all infantry, but gets countered easily by cavalry or range units. That's when your Youxia, with their shield wall formation, could neglect the charge damage from the cavalry and kind of protect your front line while holding the bay away from range arrows at the same time, while performing decently well against infantry. So overall, any combination of these 3 units are very, very good on the Physician. Now, why is that? This is because with this build shown here, we have first increased speed and increased charge speed on all these units. This increases the charge damage output and the closing speed for all 3 of our high-end melee units. On top of this, they will all get melee damage boost, increased replenishment in the army, and post-battle loot increases as well. And they get the nice armor and morale bonus to add on to all that. So in summary here for the healer class, we have 4 distinct skill tree here out of the 5 backgrounds. For the Visor and Singer background, there is no best build here. These 2 backgrounds are terrible, and the best thing you can do with these characters is to ignore them and leave them as your simple idle court characters that provides a little boost of income for your faction. In the late game, your Visor can be considered for a leadership role if you really need more corruption reduction, because the -10 corruption reduction, like we said before, is a scarce commodity in the Yellow Turban factions, as you lack the buildings to reduce corruption in your empire. Next, we have Fortune Teller, which is your best at everything background for the healer class. They make great commanding generals running full armies of Bringers of Righteousness, or they make great early game leading generals running peasant archers or Yellow Turban archers, and they can be good commerce income boosting leaders who can help you reduce your redeployment costs and add an army count to your faction. Even as idle court characters, they outperform everyone else at that role, as they not only boost all 3 income sources, they also boost research rate. Following them, we have the Musician, which can also be great Bringers of Righteousness generals, but they're not so good in a commanding role, so perhaps considering putting them in a more range-focused composition where you want your commanding generals to be a scholar, for example, with the precision skill to increase firing rate on the whole army. Finally, we have the Physician background, which is best at fielding melee army compositions with their array of speed and damage bonuses. And as a healer, you have a lot of good melee choices to pick from. So if you have an army that's running more of a melee focused composition with chanters being supported from the scholar class or scholar warriors, then Physician will be your go-to choice as the healer in that army. So with that said, we did ignore most of the local leader roles simply because you just don't have high enough expertise stats on these characters, and you also don't have any complementary base game skills to make them into your local leaders. So far, if you're looking for local leaders, stick to the scholar class. So this concludes our guide on the healer class. Hope you guys enjoyed this in-depth guide, and see you next time when we wrap up this series with a veteran class. Bye!